All right, everybody, we have a very special first guest for you on this Veterans Day show. He is a veteran himself, a former West Point graduate and Army Ranger. He is also a veterans advocate who now leads Restore the Military, Doug Truax. Doug, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Amanda, thanks for having me on.
I'm delighted to have you here and on a perfect day. I know that you wrote this article especially for Veterans Day, but honoring the sacrifice by restoring the military's warrior ethos. That warrior ethos took what I think a lot of people thought might have been fatal blows under the Biden administration. But boy, oh boy, Secretary Hegseth, and of course with President Trump at the helm, it seems like it has returned with vengeance.
Yeah, it's been a breath of fresh air, and it goes back a long, long way. I graduated from West Point in '92, so all the way back to Clinton, Obama, and then, Trump in the first term. He was under fire a lot, so he didn't have a lot of opportunity to make changes. But then Biden was just really over the top with this. It is just a constant, steady slide within the military. You saw this in recruiting numbers and just morale in general. Why would you want to join a military? It's more concerned about talking about transgender and DEI than it was about lethality. It makes you nervous, especially if you're a parent, your kid's talking about enlisting. You're thinking to yourself, I don't know if these guys have their act together. And so, that's a very, on the ground way to look at it. But then the larger problem is, of course, the military gets weaker and weaker, and the bottom line is, it's a fallen world out there, and every nation has to fend for themselves on some level. And if you don't have a military, you're going to lose your country eventually. And so this is huge implications going into the future. So the place we're at today, versus where we were even a year ago, it's just like I said, it's a breath of fresh air. It's definitely a great directional change. There's a lot of work still to be done as part of the work we're doing to restore the military to make sure we're getting back on track. But we're definitely going the right direction thanks to President Trump and War Secretary Hegseth. So grateful to see that on this Veterans Day, but still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of these mixed messages and the weakening of that ethos under Joe Biden. And the sad reality is that because of Joe Biden's stance on foreign policy, which was weakness through confusion, I suppose, because now we have peace through strength, but weakness through confusion, that made our military in even more peril when military readiness was not at the top of its game.
Yeah, that's right. And when you don't have the general class in particular, like you look at Milley and even Lloyd Austin when he was Secretary of Defense back then, just so focused on white rage and all these different things, when at the same time, the world is getting more and more dangerous. I remember watching the whole thing happen and this is going no place good quickly. And you think about even now with the Chinese, they're trying to undermine us every day, all day. And if we act like everything's fine and, we don't need a strong military as much as we used to, that's playing right into their hands. And we have got to make sure as a country that we are doing everything we can to make sure that if we do have to go to war, we win. It's not even close. And I think that's the best service that we can provide as patriots in this country to our veterans and obviously to our active duty is to arm them and equip them with every possible thing. We went to $1 trillion budget for the War Department, and that's a huge number. But I can tell you, too, there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in there. If we continue to get that out and work on it and then reallocate that money to producing the right weapons and training and everything else, we'll be back in the place we want to be. And I would encourage everybody that's just, in favor of our country to be okay with saying, hey, I don't think this is a good idea that we do this with the military. I think in our country, out of respect, a lot of people, if they didn't serve, they don't want to say anything that might be taken as untoward towards the military. But I think we got to get over that as a country and just say, look, this is important to all of us. I support the military, and especially the veterans that have served and now they're out. You don't want them looking back at the military saying, what the heck is going on? What happened here? You want to make sure that it's, it's as strong as it can be for those folks that served and did their time. And then obviously for the people that are now, that they might have to go down range. And we want to make sure they're as equipped as they possibly can be, as trained as they possibly can be, and acting in our national interest. And that's what we want in a military and for our country going forward in general.
Yeah, absolutely. When President Trump announced that he was nominating Pete Hegseth to be the War Secretary, I remember seeing the left side of the aisle, their reaction to it. And of course, the first title that they mentioned The first credit they mentioned of his was that he was a Fox News weekend co-host, and then they listed his military credentials at the end, which I thought was pathetically insulting and deceptive. But what does it mean to the military, to the men and women who are on the ground, whether it's at a base here on U.S. soil or elsewhere? What does it mean to them to have someone who is overseeing them who actually has seen combat, a combat veteran?
That's right. Yeah, it's huge because you want to make sure that the person that's leading you up at the top understands what you would have to go through, and will be willing to do it themselves. I mean, the greatest leaders are always the ones that set the example themselves by willing to do what they're asking their subordinates to do. So, having been in combat, Secretary Hegseth can quickly say, "Hey guys, I know nobody wants to do this, but we're going to have to go do it because it's in the nation's interest, and this is what you signed up for." And I'd say in particular too, when he got all the generals together, I know it wasn't like standard practice, but I can tell you this: anybody that's been in the military, especially being in the Army, whatever level you're at, platoon, company, battalion, brigade, division, it's quite all right to get all your senior leaders together and just say, "Hey, everybody, this is where I'm at with things. This is the direction we're going." Because once they hear it from you and they all hear it together, they can go out there and say, "Look, this is the new direction we're going in. The culture has changed. Yeah, we were doing that before. We're not doing that anymore. This is the path we're on now." And I think that that's helpful for all those leaders to have heard that all in one place. And then they go forward and they talk to their division commanders and brigade commanders, and down it goes, and they kind of share that back to them. So I think that that's super important that he did that. I know people, like you say in the press, like, "Oh, why would he take all these people? They're so important." Yeah, they're important, but they're still in the military and they still got to follow orders. And I don't care who you are, and so, and even above that, the commander in chief, per the Constitution, is the president, who tells Hegseth what to do too. So there's a distinct chain of command here. We got to follow it. I think back when Milley was talking to the Chinese and all that, we just got way sideways with some of these generals thinking, "I'm just going to do what I got to do because I want to go get on the board at Raytheon or General Dynamics or whatever else." Enough of that. Do your job. Get ready, get your soldiers and your troops ready to go downrange if they have to, because then, to the point that Secretary Hegseth was making, if we're prepared for war, chances are we'll not have to fight it. If we're not prepared, to the point you were making a minute ago, the world was going crazy, the higher the probability is we're going to have to go fight one. So it's a smart thing to do, to get everybody on the same page and get straight, and it makes our country stronger, makes the military stronger. That's what we all want.
Doug, I saw a heartbreaking video of a 100-year-old World War II veteran from the UK, and he was practically in tears in this video, and he said, why did my friends die at Normandy? Why did my friends die fighting in the Pacific Theater? And it was heartbreaking because you look at what's happening in the UK as far as freedom of speech and the influx of immigrants into their country, and it is practically unrecognizable from what it was even 10 years ago. Do you share those concerns? I mean, I know we obviously here in the United States, thank goodness, we still care about and value and protect our First Amendment, but things could go sideways with just one administration.
That's right. That's right. Every day I wake up and I thank God I'm in this country, and I feel bad for him. It's terrible what's happened in the UK. I don't want to be a downer here on Veterans Day, but there is one thing that we need to have a reckoning for, and that's Afghanistan. We had decades and decades of people just pouring money, people losing their lives and their limbs. We had a lot of generals and a lot of politicians telling us, "Oh, everything's going to be fine. We got to hang in there. The Afghans, they're going to take over. It's going to be great." It all ended in a weekend. And, I'm 55, and that was like the lowest point of my life from just being, what has happened to our country here. And there needs to be a serious reckoning about that whole experience that led up to that weekend where it all went south. And those guys have got to answer questions. And we still haven't done that. I hope that we certainly will. But that act alone will make sure that going forward, we get much more precise about this is our national interest. This is why we need to go to combat about it. And people will know that if in the military or even politicians, that if they're making stuff up, if they're fudging numbers to make it look better than it is, and people are losing their lives and they're doing terrible things because they're out in the middle of nowhere with no mission, there will come a day of reckoning. And we still have to have that for Afghanistan. But outside of that, we're doing all the right things we can from the military right now. And Lord willing, it'll keep getting stronger. the country will stay on track and we won't end up like England. It's a terrible thing to watch. You know, we got to stay on the right path here.
Doug, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to ask you about this because I know your organization, Restore the Military, has identified about 110 employees at the Department of War who have contributed to this degradation of the military, and you guys want to see some accountability. Who would you get that accountability from? What do you want to see happen?
Well, what's already happened, so we've had them up there for a little bit. We have the posted date on there, so it's 110, maybe more now, mostly generals and admirals. And these are people that have that embrace the DEI concept. Because when you're in the military, if you get a memorandum, let's say you're a lieutenant colonel, battalion commander, you get a memorandum and you have to follow the law and do the thing and do the class, and you don't, you know it's stupid, right? But you're going to do it and move on.
Right.
That happens. But these are all people that embrace the concept, which then they are demonstrating terrible judgment, because when you embrace that concept, you're embracing lack of unity, which is the one thing you need if you're going to go to war amongst the troops. And so what we've done on our website, restorethemilitary.com, as you can see on there, we've taken their own words, their own videos, whatever they've said, their own speeches, and we put it right up there, and we demonstrate that they were the embracers of the concept. And so far, about a third of them have already been fired, forced out, whatever, out you go, doesn't matter.
Excellent.
We have to set an example here, and thankfully Secretary Hegseth and those guys, I think they're looking and paying attention, and we're letting the entire military know that we're watching, and that's an important piece too.
Excellent. I absolutely love that. Immediate accountability. Doug Truax, thank you so much. You said it's restorethemilitary.com?
That's right.
Perfect. Everybody go there, support them. Doug, it's a pleasure to have you here tonight, and happy Veterans Day to you.